My 28M, fiancé, 28F, of 4.5 years recently called of our engagement after an argument about her college diploma. For context, we have been dating 4.5 years, and of that time we have been engaged 6 months. I proposed last January. From the day we met, she has been in school, and originally was living with her family while she did just that. No job, no other responsibilities. Just school. That being said, as we progressed over time and she slowly began to spend less time at her family's house and more time with me, I became more responsible for our living expenses as she had no income other than financial aid a few times a year. Since I am active duty military, my housing is covered for the most part depending on location and rank, and I lived in a 1-bed 1-bath that was easy to incorporate her into when she'd come and visit for the weekend or so. About a year later, I bought my first house and had roommates, which made finances much easier. Additionally, she eventually got a part-time job which helped her cover her own expenses better and even offer some help with bills. However, for the most part one was still majorly responsible for our expenses as these part-time jobs never seemed to last, but I was okay with it because I loved her and believed I was helping her achieve her goal of a degree. Several years later, a few months ago we were having a discussion about moving on to base housing. I sold my house prior to moving for my next tour and have since been living in apartments again. For anyone who is unfamiliar with military terms, base housing is just as it sounds. A house in a neighborhood built within the perimeter of the base. Since our time together we got a dog, and often wished he could have a yard again for him. Additionally, we had some real close friends who also lived on base, and it would make our very frequent weekend BBQs much more enjoyable if we were able to just walk home rather than drive 30 minutes, not to mention more space, a guest room for friends and family to visit. Just overall a better situation. There was a catch, however. In order to be eligible for base housing, we would need to be legally married. Something that is fairly common in military relationships, a courthouse-style wedding, although not always for the best reasons. Since we had already been engaged half a year, and I was due to deploy later on this year, holding off any real wedding planning alongside her graduation coming in the fall, we had discussed the benefits of having a quick courthouse elopement prior to my deployment so I could share my service benefits with her, healthcare, family services, etc. And a huge plus was the pay raise. About $1,000 extra a month. That we had talked about saving and using for our actual wedding whenever we decided what we wanted to do. This wasn't the only time I had brought up progressing this way, as the benefits IMO greatly outweighed any risks. We had plenty of dialogue in the past as well that led me to believe she felt the same way, and in fact wanted to be official just as much as I did, aside from all the things discussed above. I brought it up casually as I usually would. A co-worker had just told me about some openings in some of the nicer houses on base. I told her about them and she was very interested. I then went on to remind her that in order for us to apply, we would first need to be legally married. For the most part one was the only one who ever brought this up, and it never really bothered me because up to this point I had no reason to believe she wanted anything different. Instead of seeming excited and willing to move forward, she began to complain about things like our marriage certificate being from a state she doesn't like, saying she'd now rather wait until we could go somewhere exotic and out of the country. This isn't something I was completely against, but it would defeat the purpose of all the reasons and benefits we had been discussing previously. I tried to reason with her, but I'll have to admit I was hurt. I was 100% willing to make this official and marry my best friend, benefits aside. I had partially hoped she'd match my energy there. Frustrated and confused, I began to seek answers. I wanted to know why I was openly 100% committed, and it felt like I wasn't getting the same in return. I began to ask for reasons or explanations on why I was feeling this way. And if there was something I was missing that may be holding her back. I remember specifically asking about school, because it was made clear in the very beginning of our relationship that school was above all the most important thing to her. To be clear, I also supported this. So much to the point where if she needed books and couldn't afford them, I ordered them for her. Her school was 100% online, so I was paying monthly for absolute screamin' internet for her. I would work full days and come home and prepare dinner, grocery shop, clean, etc. You guys get it. I was her #1 fan, and supported her and loved her though all the failed exams, birthdays and events missed because she's in a group meeting, and constantly promoted positivity and clarity regarding any uncertainty about her degree plan and future. I was there and did everything I could. I am confident in that even as I type this now. When we got to this topic, I'll cut right to it. I asked her if she was hesitant because of anything to do with school or her upcoming graduation. This is where she told me that she hadn't really thought much of it, but now that she does, she doesn't want to get married prior to her graduation because she doesn't want my last name to be the one on her diploma. She told me that if it was that way, she felt as if it would take away from her and her accomplishments alone. She has been doubted before by other family, and if it didn't say her name it wouldn't feel as good to prove those doubters wrong. Something like that. This hit home, probably harder due to the, what felt like, rejection earlier on the legal marriage. All I was trying to do was ensure one. She was taken care of while I'm away from home and can't help. And 2. Progress our relationship to what seemed like our next organic step and what had been mutually desired and agreed upon. This causes a huge argument, as she begins to label me as controlling for not seeing why it had to be her way. And we spent the entire night making attempts to show where we had been hurt by the other. Eventually we had made up, found common ground, enough to shower together and spend some close time in bed. Sadly, it wasn't enough. The next day she came home in tears, informed me that everything from last night wasn't sitting well with her, and that she was moving back home and calling off our engagement. I was handed back the ring and began to try to ask questions. What changed? I thought last night we were okay, etc. She told me she had nothing else to say to me, but through the tears and packing managed to look me in the eyes and say these last words: even if I realize I'm making the biggest mistake of my life, it is something I am going to live with because there's no coming back. She left me and our dog that night after taking everything she cared enough about and packing it into her car. It's been a few months since this all went down. All of this time has been no contact. I think it also needs to be said that I never expected her to have my last name on her diploma. It was something I never even thought about until the heat of the argument. I think what really got me, what really cut deep, was hearing her say, her and her accomplishments alone, that while looking me dead in my face like I haven't done shit to help her get there. Again, all Eve ever known her as was a student. I accepted the financial burden that was trying to build a life with someone, in that stage of life. It was never about me expecting that, but I guess also I had believed that if the roles were reversed, if I were that student being taken care of single-handedly by this person I loved more than anything, said yes to marrying, knowing the sacrifices and difficulty of taking care of someone who can hardly maintain a part-time job, maybe I wouldn't try to act like I did this on my own. I was very us-oriented. I made almost every important decision thinking of how it could help us or benefit us. I think I set myself up for failure assuming I would have that same level of commitment in return. I also know I took it much harder given circumstances, but never would have guessed it would tear apart a 4-year relationship for wanting to feel appreciated and recognized for IMO going above and beyond anyone else in her life to help her achieve her goal. Edit, okay, wow, this gained way more attention than I ever thought it would. To the 400 of you who have taken the time to read this short novel, this is honestly as short as I could make it. Thanks ADHD, and even left some advice, guidance, or just kind words. You have no idea how therapeutic this has been. I have yet to get any professional help, but who needs it when the people of Reddit are this rad? A few things I'd like to address. 1. We both had talked and agreed upon the idea that we would eventually share a last name. It was not to be controlling, to show ownership, or anything crazy like that. I think we were both just traditionally oriented, and it was never really a thought or idea to have separate names until this night when the diploma came into question. We used to name our non-existent kids together in bed during pillow talk. Never once was the last name anything other than mine. I never thought it was that way to be controlling or stuck in old times. People have different opinions and I respect them regardless. 2. I would have been fine with her keeping her last name on the diploma. It was not so much the topic, rather how it was addressed. I felt hurt and acted accordingly. After all I was trying to do was take better care of her while I'm deployed. This was going to be our second deployment together. We had openly agreed after the first one that I would never make her be a girlfriend for another deployment, promising more commitment to her from myself. I was trying to stay true to that promise. Especially after the amount of time we had already been together. A proposal was long overdue. 3. Had she not been looking for a way out, I would agree that clearly there was an easy solution here. She gets her name on the diploma, it doesn't keep us from getting married, we progress, and eventually this was a meaningless fight. The hard truth, that most of you are saying, is that it really had nothing to do with the reason she left. It was just the excuse. This has been overwhelmingly the common thought from most commenters. I think you all are right. Thank you for pushing the hard facts.